What's going on YouTube? Cloverbells here back with another Scarlet Violet video, and today we are going to be going over the results from the Monterrey Regionals from this past weekend. So just like Frankfurt Regionals, this was another regional happening at the same time here. A little bit less of a turnout, of course, just under 300 participants from what I understand, but a regional is a regional nonetheless, and that means it is still data that you have to look at heading into Pittsburgh this weekend here. So if you are competing in Pittsburgh, again, don't only look at Frankfurt Regionals, also look at Monterrey right here. And there was also another tournament that happened just last night. It was the Hemi Turner tournament, also just about 300 players. Of course, when you have a large prize pool that Hemi was giving out, you're going to get a lot of participants too. So we can also preview that as well, shortly. But I want to look at this because there were also some teams here that you just did not quite see from Frankfurt here. So you want to get the scope of both regionals here, so at least you can be better prepared for what to expect at Pittsburgh here. So like as always, we're going to go over usage rates. We're going to look at cores. We're going to look at niche Pokemon here. Speaking of niche Pokemon, you already know from Pengy, aka Stefan Mott, he was able to come out on top with not just Scyther, but also Sylveon and his patented Moringa Berry Garganical here, the MVP of his squad. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and let's jump into the results. All right, so let's take a look at the usage stats here, at least heading into day one here. So it's actually Dragonite at number one, and I can't remember the last time I saw D-Knight at number one usage for regional, but here we are. If you remember Frankfurt in day one, Dragonite was fourth behind the patented core of Sneasel, Goldengo, and Incineroar here. And those were neck and neck as well, with Rillaboom at number four here. Here, D-Knight is able to get the edge in this one at number one, and then Goldengo, Incin, and Sneasel at 2, 3, and 4. So not too much difference there. A little bit of flip-flop, but honestly, more or less the same kind of percentage. Again, with D-Knight at 34% from Frankfurt, we're looking at 43 over here. So that's actually a pretty considerable difference, but you have to remember that the player size is a little bit different. Frankfurt had like 700 plus. Here we have just under 300 there. So a little bit more than half the amount of people. But that being said, look at this. You got the Ape here at number 5, and back in Frankfurt, it was in the 6th place slot here. Rillaboom at number 6, 4th place from Frankfurt here. So again, more or less the same 6 are the same ones, right? It's just a little bit of a flip flop here. Then you had Blood Moon Ursaluna at 7. Okay, Archelodon and Pelipper at 8 and 9. Then regular Ursaluna at 10, and then Amoonguss and the male Indeedee at number 12 there. So Gambit fell off a little bit, right? Because Gambit is down here at 16th at 11%, whereas at least in Frankfurt, it was able to make the graphic here. So interesting in that sense. Male Indeedee here cracking the top 12 just means there's a little bit more hyper offense and a little bit more Psychic Seed Sneasel, if you will, right? So that's expected. And of course, you're going to see quite a bit of Archelodon Rain. These were also outside of the top 6 from Frankfurt, but again, still within the top 12, right? So honestly, not a whole lot of change, just a little bit more flip-flop in terms of the usage rates, because now what you can also do is on Lab Mouse, you can also click these mods and take a look at the items and kind of sets they were using. Of course, Dragonite over here, 92% of the D-Knights were loaded dice sets, of course, with the Scale Shot here. Then a little bit of Choice Band usage. So all in all, still relatively consistent. No change there really in the D-Knight. Maybe a little bit of a change in some of the Terra options, right? But all in all, like, you're going to see a lot of Tailwind D-Knights here. And of course, Haze is a very, very good move here. And the occasional tech moves of something like Extreme Speed or Stomping Tantrum. And the, occasional Terra Ground as well, just to go with it, right? Goldengo here. Life Orb, 64 uses, right? So 54%, right? So very interesting there. Then you have the Scarf and Spec sets, depending on the type of Goldengo you're wanting to run. There's our favorite, the Grassy Seed tech, right? With the Rillaboom there. So that's expected. Instant here, sometimes they'll go between Goggles and AV. You also have a little bit of Citrus Berry usage over there. So those are your 3 most popular items, right? And otherwise, no real change here from the Incineroar in terms of usage. The Sneasel here. Now, are we Sash or... Oh, look at this. How about the Psychic Seeds trumping the Focus Sash over here? So that means there's a lot more Indeedee paired with it, and that's exactly what you see over here, right? Look at that. 42% of Sneasel's teammates are actually the Indeedee there. So that's quite the development there. But again, also nothing new, right? Male Indeedee is a good partner just to enable the Unburden, right? As is Grassy Seed, right? So that's also here. some of that as well. And then, of course, White Herb is just really good against anti-intimidate stuff. How about the ape here? Highest item here is going to be the goggles, but of course the recovery items like berry and leftovers are also really solid. Choice scarf set, sometimes you'll see the final gambit stuff there, so that's a little bit more niche, but again, still common enough where like you can say, okay, yeah, scarf ape is still somewhat of a thing. Then as we go down here, Rillaboom, probably the AV. Yep, that is clearly what the Rillabooms like to use, but occasionally you'll see the Miracle Seed, just in case the Assault Vest is placed on something like the Blood Moon Ursaluna or even the Incineroar, for example. Then you can go Miracle Seed with the occasional Protects, of course. Drum Beating has been a tech that is rising a little bit more, right, with the speed control there. And this under grassy terrain does considerable chip damage, if anything, right? And then the high horsepower, good ground move coverage, very useful into stuff like Incineroar and Goldengo and even King Gambit. Blood Moon Ursaluna. All right, so the most popular item right now is actually the AV, getting a little bit more of an edge over the Life Orb, so 6% more. And there's the occasional Focus Sash, right? So that's also relatively interesting there. Archelodon here, mostly AV, 80% if anything. Still just under 20% for the Power Herb set. These are usually going to be like the sturdy Archelodons there. And then finally here, you know, a little bit of Pelipper stuff. Again, mostly Sash stuff. The occasional Covert Cloak. Nothing really too crazy there in terms of Pelipper uses. Ursaluna, same thing. Of course, your Flame Orb there. You don't really need to check that. Mungus, same thing. Berry, Rocky Helmet, Covert Cloak. These are always going to be your 3 most popular items in a non-restricted format. Indeedee over here. The Scarf is a little bit more popular than the Sash, right? Just a little bit more speed advantage there, just to be able to get off more Expanding Forces, for example. And then even though these are not within the top 12, I still want to spotlight some of these guys, like Volcarona. Again, the Covert Cloak is the most popular item, along with Terra Fairy. Quiver Dance is strong. You get to outspeed everything and then just sweep the opponent, right? It's a very, very good win condition right now. You do have to watch out for Tyrannotars, which is why they also rose in usage. But overall, like Cloak and even Berry is also a very, very consistent item. Same thing with Leftovers. Tyranitar, probably mostly Assault Vest. This is what we're talking about here. 81% there. Some clear Amulet usage, but not a whole lot. And then finally, I want to also just look at King Gambit here. Yeah, black glasses, but it's not clear cut, right? You know, 14% 42% black glasses and the occasional safety goggles set for the Gambit there. So honestly, no real surprises there. You know, the items that you'd expect to see on these mines, this is exactly what we're dealing with here, right? So I'm just interested to see now the difference between day 1 and day 2. Then as we look into day 2 here, some newcomers here. Now we get Tyranitar entering the top 12 graphic here, of course. Then Incin dropping all the way down to 9th is actually quite interesting, believe it or not. And then Volcarona and Basculegion also entering the graphic here. Now again, not a whole lot of quote-unquote usage just in terms of like raw numbers, because the regional is a little bit smaller, but at the very least, these are still Pokemon you need to be aware of because they're so common on like other teams, right? Of course, the Basculegion, the main sweeper physically on those Archelodon rain teams. Volcarona also with Quiver Dance, comboed with King Gambit, Swords Dance, Double Dance as we like to call it, are also quite strong there. And then of course Tyranitar just looks really good overall with its coverage, you know, with rock coverage into like other Volcaronas, other flying types like Dragonite, the Sand Chip, breaking multi-scale, breaking Sash, Terra Blast, you know, against the grass types like Rillaboom, other Sneasers as well, knock off into Goldengos and the Side Spam stuff, you know, with your dark typing and dark coverage. Tyranitar is like the Swiss Army knife of Regulation Age, as I like to say right now. And then Sneasel dropping all the way down to 6th place there. Now, again, still very high usage, right? You know, 36% there, but very notable indeed there still. The Ape is up to number 2, so that is also quite interesting. But again, take it with a grain of salt, but at the very least, it still gives you an idea, you know, at least for a day 2 perspective, what was doing relatively well here. So you can probably say, look, the Doug ideas with Dragonite, Ursaluna, and Goldengo look good, right? Along with Mousehold and Annihilate Cores, look, there's 11 Mouseholds here, right? So that's also strong. And then Archelodon still, right? Volcarona, Basculegion. So you would imagine like maybe a couple of rain teams are up there as well. And Tyranitar, depending on whether it was like a sand balance team or maybe just Tyranitar slapped onto a particular kind of team just to patch up a couple of matchups, also looks relatively strong there as well. So yeah, anyway, now what we want to do is let's take a look at some of the teams, so this way we can see what people were actually using, just from a core 6 or even like just cores overall. All right, so let's take a look at the top cut results here. So let's look at Pengy's team over here. So this was one of the big stories of Monterrey, right? Look, you've got a Scyther, Sylveon, and a Moringa Berry Garganical here. Then the Scarf Goldengo, the AV Incin, and the Alolan Ninetales here. By the way, all three of these guys, they have just offensive Terras all together, right? Terra Fire Incin, Terra Steel Goldengo, Scarf, by the way, right? And then the Terra Ice Alolan Ninetales. So it's like this left side, 3 of the more standard stuff. This right side, 3 of the niche ideas here. But Pengy last year used 4 of these monsters, so this is like more or less up his comfort zone, right? When I saw that he was going to bring Garganical to Monterrey, I knew this had to be like Moringa Berry, which is what he was using last year. Took a lot of people by surprise, of course, because not many people knew what Moringa Berry did, but people know what it does now, right? A year later, okay, but Garganical is an interesting niche right here, right? And if I'm looking at this team, this looks like a Garganical kind of team here. Now, I know people are like focused on the Scyther, right? But this is just a specific kind of matchup, especially for the Annihilate here, right? Technician dual wing beat is actually really, really strong. Before I go into the Garganical, looking at the Scyther here, what's really important is actually the speed here. First of all, like again, Scyther's base stats aren't that bad, right? When you can put on an Eviolite on this, okay, now all of a sudden this is super bulky, right? 120 for bases, right? And then the 105 speed stat is important, right? Because if I were to max speed this without any kind of speed nature, I'm at 157. That's actually important because Jolly Ape, if its max speed, is 156. So you get to outspeed it, and at the same time, you can have Technician dual wing beat, right? Now, dual wing beat as a whole, just like a Talonflame, is it gets the break stats. It's super effective against fighting type, Pokemon here, but you're doing a lot more damage than a Talonflame, might I add, right? And now that you add Technician to this, okay, now you're just getting a little bit more damage at the same time here, right? And if I were to pull up some damage calcs here, like let's say, I have a 180 HP Annihilate here, not partnered, but a standard 208 HP Annihilate, something with like a Citrus Berry or Leftovers Recovery, and I put this face to face with something like a Scyther, even if I'm not max attack, look how easily dual wing beat can pick up the Annihilate there. You're basically forcing it to Terra. Now, of course, there is a mouse hold that you have to worry about, right? But this is also where you have other options on your team, like especially with Pengy, he was also running close combat there. But at the same time, look, the fact that you can outspeed the Ape and threaten it with the KO with dual wing beat without not even necessarily to invest max attack is good, because now you can invest more into your bulk and into your HP, right? And I'm not even sure if he was max speed anyway, so that remains to be seen. I also thought this Scyther would be a Tailwind set. It is not. Of course, Pengy is using like close combat there. I knew something like U-turn was actually useful there. Decent chip damage, reposition the board a little bit, but very, very cool niche. And again, Bug Flying, also very good into stuff like Sneasel, for example, right? Like we've seen stuff like, Yanmega or even the Vivian stuff. These are all within the realm, Bug Flying typing, really good against like the fighting stuff, especially again, like I said, Sneasel. So Scyther can now fit that bill as well. But, according to Pengy, right, it's just really, really solid into the Annihilate matchup there, right? That being said, the rest of the team, like Garganical, again, we're not trying to one-shot a lot of things here. With this kind of team, especially with the Scarf Goldengo, not having Tailwind, Scarf Goldengo actually helps a lot too. If you can just use the Garg and chip things down to like half health, that's where stuff like, Goldengo can really start picking up KOs, even like Incin and Ninetales, if anything. Or you can think about it in the reverse way, where Goldengo can just give you instant office and just go like double, make it rain, good solid chip damage, doesn't even have to KO. As long as you can get things, down below 50% or even like at 50%, this is where like Garganical can finish things off, stuff like Salt Cure, Recover, Protects over time, and then even Stealth Rock, a little bit more additional chip damage coming in and just, winning from there, right? So that's kind of how you have to view it. You're not trying to like one-shot things. You're just trying to chip things down slowly until either Garg or Goldengo can finish things up. According to Pengy, he was saying the Sylveon was more like for the King Gambit matchup, and I believe him, right? So, with Sylveon, there's not a whole lot of fairies running around, right? No Fluttermane, so stuff like Ninetales is able to thrive very well against stuff like Dragonite. Sylveon can do that more or less the same way. Spread Hyper Voice with Pixelate damage and throw space also really, really strong. Yawn and Wish are, pretty cool techs, right? Yawn forcing sleep, position-based stuff. Like if you force a switch out, right, that combos well with something like Stealth Rock there, a little bit more chip damage. Wish just extends your longevity over time, right? So then this way, if you're going for like Salt Cures, you're just able to protect and they just take more damage from Salt Cures, right? So all in all, Sylveon looks good into, the King Gambit stuff, as Stefan would say. But the rest of the team, again, AV Insane with Terrifier is also interesting, right? A little bit more damage. And this is great into stuff like Volcarona. You could eat a lot of their moves, especially, and Terrifier Flare Blitz is going to do so much damage into them as well, right? Terra Steel, Make It Rain, Goldengo, also very, very strong too. Trick, Choice Scarf is also quite interesting if you can, get that off. Maybe even like trick your own Mon, for example, there, right? And then Ninetales, a little bit more extra bulk here with Aurora Veil. Again, combos well with the Salt Cure stuff. You're taking less damage. You're just, slowly recovering over time. So not bad, right? And that's really all you need to do with something like this. So it's a pretty cool team when you really think about it. So shout outs to Pengy, just overall performance. Great job there. Now we look at number 2 here. This is like a little bit more standard stuff. Sneasler, Gambit, Balance, with Swords Dance, King Gambit. Buzz, Volcarona, again, double dance with Volcarona, double dance with King Gambit there. That's also relatively solid. Again, Electabuzz is also really, really solid support here with the Gambit. And then let's look at Justin's team here. That looks like more or less the same team from Toronto over there. All right, so this is more or less the same team that Justin's been using. Again, more or less comfort pick that he was using in Toronto. I think he changed a little bit of the EVs, but overall, it's still more, the same kind of squad here. This one's a little bit interesting, right? Here we go. Tyranitar with the Mousehold Annihilate idea. Again, with Sinistra, and then Screens Klefki here. We've seen these core 4 before. Blood Moon Ursulina with AV is also quite solid here. How about Clear Amulet Tyranitar with Terra-type Terra Flying here with Protect as well there. So that's also quite interesting. With Clear Amulet, T-Tar, and then Annihilate there, I don't think there's going to be too many Incineroars that wants to come into this type of matchup here. Misty Terrain, again, nice little tech there to override Terrain overall, and then stop Sneasler shenanigans, of course. Then this one is Greninja team. How about this from Will Brown? So Archelodon, Pelipper, Basculegion, there's your Rain Core there. And then, Greninja has been used on these teams before with Water Shuriken just to be able to activate stamina boost. Then you also have Haze support, again, for, the opponent. And then Manual Rain Dance is quite nice. And then Dark Pulse there. What's really cool about Greninja is that it's faster than Sneasler. So that's the one niche that it has in this type of format here. And then just Goggles Ape here, as opposed to something like having a Sinistra support here. This is quite interesting here. But again, Mousehold, but Sinistra is still able to support teams like this because you have Trick Room, and then you also have healing for both your Ape and your Archelodon here. All right, moving down here, we got Marcus Dion, again with Mousehold Ape, partnered with Tailwind D-Knight, and then Specs Goldengo, right? So if you can get the speed on your side here, Specs Goldengo just goes crazy here, chipping the opponent, maybe even just picking up raw KOs as well. Super Fang, again, reasonable chip damage, getting things down to 50%, where something like a Basculegion or even Goldengo can pick up, or, chip something down to 50%, and even Dragonite Scale Shots can pick up, just make sure you hit. AV Instant with Terra Grass is also quite solid there. Okay, then we have Eric Schrader. This is one of those Sneasler Annihilate teams with Excadrill Tyranitar. So this is like one of those Sneasler Sand Balance teams. Okay, we have Mousehold here. This usually would be something like a Corviknight here, but again, if you're going to run Sneasler like this, I think Psychic Seize makes sense here. But I still like this team. I think the Mousehold is an interesting idea here as opposed to something like the Corviknight there. A little bit of redirection support, I guess, is interesting, right? Just to go well with your Annihilate. So it kind of changes how the team functions a little bit there, because again, this Ape isn't a final Gambit set. It's just meant to also have another engine to the team besides the Excadrill Tyranitar stuff. So all in all, a nice little way to use Sand Balance there. And then finally, Brandon Davis, who has used plenty of Trick Room teams in the past. Looks like he's doing it yet again here, but a little bit of a niche. All right, he's got Flamigo here, which has had success before with Ursaluna, of course, being able to Earthquake next to it, as a flying type. Scrappy, is also quite strong because, again, you can hit ghost types and you can't get intimidated. So that's the main selling point there. Dual Wing Beat, again, also quite solid into Sneasers and Annihilates. And then Salamence here, again, Dragon Flying with Tailwind support is quite good. And, with Intimidate support, you're just neutering physical damage here. Another nice partner next to Ursaluna that you can Earthquake next to. Another Dual Wing Beat user. Dual Wing Beat, one of the better moves right now in the format, right? Just because you can, again, bypass the Sash. And, Indeedee, Armarouge, Trick Room stuff here. So it's almost like a couple of cores here, right? And then you just have a Archelon with Power Up here that can do well with Tailwind support with Salamence here, right? So overall, pretty cool, unique team from Brandon Davis there. So there are a couple of unique teams here, right? Besides the Pengi's team over here. So overall, I think some of these teams will definitely carry over into Pittsburgh there. So just be on the lookout here, especially, Mr. Pengi, who's probably going to be there himself. So be on the lookout there. Okay, so now what we want to do, let's take a look at some other teams that also did relatively well here. All right, looking at some other notable teams here. I want to take a look at this one here from Jin Fury, aka Luke, right? So Jin, if you don't know, has always used Hard Trick Room teams many times. And, he always has a little bit of a curveball just to make the team a little bit more unique, right? Because otherwise, these Hard Trick Room teams, they can be relatively linear. Besides the Indeedee, Hatterene, Torkoal, Ursaluna cores, you'll have stuff like, Gallade and Hisui and Lilligant, right? And those teams are, pretty easy to play, of course, but also somewhat difficult to master because, again, you can kind of make reads on a lot of those teams because you just need to stall out the Trick Room turns and then you're fine, right? But look at what Jin has here, man. He's got a lot of different options here. Look at the Charizard here. First of all, you usually don't see Charizard on teams like this, but of course, here we are with the Scarf, might I add. So now you can outspeed a lot of threats, and then you're dealing damage in the sun thanks to Torkoal. Okay, you got Overheat, Heat Wave, Air Slash. Then you have Dragon Tail. My God, Dragon Tail, the tech move just to force switches out there. And then you have your second terrain here with the Rillaboom, especially with Miracle Seed here. You're going to do a lot of damage. So this is quite interesting. And it also has Taunt there. So, with Fake Out pressure on your side, we've seen Fake Out Trick Room teams before. It's quite interesting here. I'm very curious why the Rillaboom had to come onto this type of team because you usually don't see something like this. So shout outs to Jin Fury for this kind of Hard Trick Room team here. Covert Cloak Hatterene, again, one of my favorite sets, by the way. It helps you dodge the Snarl shenanigans, of course. And then Mystical Fire Terrifier is also quite the nice tech that we used to see back in Sword and Shield here, right? But then moving down here, look at Len Duel here. His name is also sometimes called Lentar because he loves to play Tyranitar stuff. Garchomp here with Corviknight here. Look at the Garchomp set though. Leftovers, Substitute there. Quite interesting. Kilowattrel, also Tailwind support. We've seen teams like this. Garchomp, Kilowattrel, Goldengo. All right, that's always like a core 3. Then you slap on Tyranitar here for a little bit of Sand Boost. This is Sandveil Trump, by the way. Then you have Corviknight here. Also understandable with Mirror Armor. That's going to help against Intimidate stuff. How about Dragapult coming onto a team like this? I didn't expect this, but here we are. But it's a special Pult. Look at this. Draco Meteor Shadow Ball Flamethrower there. Very, very interesting. And it's Infiltrator too. So interesting choice there. Would love to know the theory behind it. Not like I know what it does, but what made Len decide on the Dragapult here is my question here. All right. Then over here, how about Aaron Cybertron saying, remember when we made our Saraledge video, we played against someone using this team here. And this is also just a relatively aggressive team. Whimsicott with Fake Tier support to help the Blood Moon, Ursaluna, Goldengo, and Archelon do extra damage here. Then you've got the Pelipper for the Archelon stuff if you have to use it. But look at this Pelipper set here, right? It's got Soak, right? Soak, and then, you're faster, which means you can make things weak to electric type attacks, which means these electro shots are just going to start one-shotting things, which is kind of funny when you think about it. Then Icy Wind, a little bit more extra speed control, because look, this isn't a Tailwind Pelipper. The Tailwind's coming from the Whimsicott here. So this is like support Pelipper here, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. And then you still enable the Basket Legion, which, by the way, is Focus Sash, which is also what Marcus Dion was using there. Because again, Grassy Legion can just kind of die with Grassy Glide, there's so much Rillaboom right now. So I think the Sash is a nice little adaptation there. And then, you know, potentially could just pick up a final KO with something like Last Respects, right? So quite interesting there. Nice little team. Aaron used this in a Limitless tour, not Limitless. I think he used this in one of the Regulation H ladder tours, right? And he ended up winning it. So yeah, he decided to like bring it to a regional, and he ends up doing very, very well here. So shout outs to Cybertron for doing this. How about Terra Fighting Goldengo, by the way? Terra Blast, Terra Fighting. Also very, very cool here. There's a lot of cool ideas here behind this squad. So shout outs to Aaron for doing this. How about the return of Clefairy here, man? Look, after you, Moonblast, Friend Guard support. This is Bandit Dragapult with Sneasel. I've always liked that combo as well. But how about the double dragon idea with Dragonite over here, right? So Tailwind support here. Actually, this is triple dragons. Look at this. Archelon, Dragonite, and Dragapult there. And then here's a Pelipper, which is Weather Ball, Hurricane, Tailwinds, and Wango. What a team, man. You know, this is another weird kind of squad there. This is quite interesting. You know, a bunch of weird teams here. Okay, then as we move down, what else are we looking at here? This one looks like, okay, this one here, you have Mousehold, but no Annihilate here. So this is just straight up population bomb Mousehold, nuke something, okay, and then pick up KOs with Grassy Seed, Goldango, and Rillaboom here. Remember, we love this combo as well on our Sarah Ledge team. And then it's Sash, Tyranitar, okay, you know, coaching Sneasler here with White Herb. So, you know, you can coach your quite a few targets. You can even coach your own Mousehold, by the way, which is kind of funny when you think about it. You can coach Tyranitar, coach Rillaboom, coach Dragonite here. Super cool idea there. Renzo Navarre looks like it's just standard backs balance here with Quiver Dance, Volcarona. It's AV Gambit too. And then this is, you know, Grassy Seed, not Grassy Seed. You know, okay, Metal Plate, Rillaboom there. I was going to say Miracle Seed there, but I forgot for a second there. What else are we looking at here? Another Heart Trick Room team here, but this time has the King Gambit, you know, with safety goggles there, as opposed to something like an Ursaluna. We saw this a little bit earlier. It's Final Gambit Ape, right? So that's pretty cool. Relatively standard team here with Doug, Daniel Nunez. Again, more Whimsicott stuff here. More Sand stuff here from David Rodriguez. What else are we looking at here? Then down here, again, more or less the Shohei team, right? From Victory Road, where you had the Mouse Ape team here. The Mouse is Sash, and then it's just Dragonite, Ursaluna, Goldango. Okay, this is again another patented core. We call it the Doug core, of course, as we like to say. So lots of Doug variations running around in Regulation H that you have to be aware for. And then you'll still get the occasional Dondozo stuff with Tatsugiri, right? Unaware Dozo, Commander Tatsugiri. This is the droopy one, right? So that means body press on this Dozo. Then Sneasler, Indeedee, Whimsicott. These are also standard brings to this type of Dondozo team. This Annihilate slot is usually the flex slot here. Maybe you'll usually see something like a Dragonite over here, or even something like the Archelon here, for example, there, but instead the Ape was chosen. So all in all, we got a bunch of Doug teams, we got a bunch of Sand teams, a bunch of Whimsicott offense, right? A couple of Heart Trick Room teams, right? And here's the one that I was talking about, right? The Gallade and then the Hisuian Lilligant here with the wide lens support. This is like your standard Hard Trick Room team here. So there was actually 3 Hard Trick Room teams here when you think about it. You know, with Jin being the one outlier there that has like some other ideas behind it, but overall, there was some teams here. Okay, this one. How about this one with Porygon 2 Ursaluna, right? But it's not quite like P2 balance. There are some like other ideas here with D9. We've seen this before, actually. Usually these teams also have Amoonguss. There is no Amoonguss. We just have Sash Ape here with coaching, right? That's also interesting, right? Coaching Ape with Dragonite here, or even technically coach your own Annihilate there. There have been a couple of Sash Apes running around, so just be aware of that. That could also be seen in Pittsburgh there. But overall, I think we've covered most of our bases. Again, this was like a much smaller regional here. So I just wanted to cover a couple of teams here that I thought should at least be on your radar here. This one is also an interesting one, right? How about the Talonflame, Meowscarada, Blood Moon stuff here, right? We've seen this before a little bit, but not all that common. And then it's AV Primarina. This is the one I forgot, right? AV Primarina, no haze, just like raw 4 attacks here. This is Pledge stuff, Water Pledge and Grass Pledge. Okay, there we go. We're using the Pledge team here. with double Ghost here with Annihilate and Specs. Goldengo here. Okay, I get it. But yeah, overall, pretty interesting regional. Much different than Frankfurt in my opinion. But you still see some of the common teams, but there were a lot of unique teams here. So just pay attention to this one in particular. Let's see if there is, in fact, carryover into Pittsburgh. I think so, just because these results are pretty good here. But we'll look at the Himi Turner Tour in the next video, because that one also had a 300-person turnout. That also could have been a regional in its entirety, right? Because, again, that was a huge turnout too. So we'll look at the results there. And, again, it's just all data that you want to be able to look at and prep for Pittsburgh, as well as, you know, maybe you want to steal an idea and bring it yourself. All right. Let me know what you thought of Monterrey here. And, again, if you need help for a future regional, sign up for coaching on the channel. Again, you got to see our Scarlet team make day 2 at Frankfurt with Sam being able to pilot it. If you are looking for something similar, make sure you sign up for coaching on the channel. Tier 3 sub gets you a one-on-one session with me via Discord. Otherwise, you can also do Tier 4, where you also get a team building session. And now we also include battle analysis, where you are able to send me your showdown replays with the team. So this way I can critique you and give you feedback on how to play the team a little bit better moving forward. All right, so that's it. We'll be back with another video in the next one. Peace out and have a good one.